Exclusively on Secular Media Network, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Hello and welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. Today is Thursday, November 26, 2015. It is Thanksgiving, and we are having a party, friends. All of us know, either in the atheist community or the LGBT community, we either know from personal experience or someone that we care about has lost family, lost loved ones because of who we are. So we are having a hangout tonight with some friends for those who may not have another place to go. We're going to have a couple of really cool special guests. We're going to have JT Eberhard. We're going to have Heina Dadabhoy. We're going to have Ryan Bell. But first, we have host of Dogma Debate, the patriarch of Secular Media Group, and all-around badass, David Smalley. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, thanks. I love that intro. One of my favorites ever.
I aim to please. I got a little bit of a beer in me to, keep the nerves down a little bit for the first live show, basically the first live show. So how has the holiday been at the Smalley household?
A lot of my listeners know that last year, Thanksgiving was a huge, huge deal for us.
Yes, and there's a story I need you to tell.
Yeah, so I can kind of recap it real quick, I guess. Essentially, there was a member of my family who made some disparaging remarks about what he would do if his son were to be gay. And he said, quote, "I'll beat the gay out of him." And, that caused me to start asking questions, as I do. And it did not turn out well. It ended up being, he got really angry. He literally tried to physically fight and asked me to come outside and, kind of lost control. And when everything calmed down, if people want to hear the full story, it's sometime after November last year. I don't remember the episode number. But, there was a lot of things said, not only about the LGBT community in general, but specifically about, the way people dress, the way people act, what's the manly thing to do versus a feminine thing to do, and all the basic gender stereotypes. And at that time, I tried to explain my side to my family members. And what I got back was, why would you try to turn our Thanksgiving into your radio show? And I'm like, that's not at all what it was. Here's the deal. I kept trying to break it down. Well, today is a year anniversary since that time. And that guy and I had a very, very long phone conversation. We kept trying to make it in person, but we were never able to do it in person. A couple of months ago, we had a very long phone conversation, and I just broke it all down for him, explained all of the types of emails that I get, and I'm assuming now you get as well. People saying, I didn't realize I had a family until I heard your show. I didn't realize I had another part of the community that supported me. I've always felt alone. I get threatened. I get made fun of. I get beat up. I was on the brink of suicide, and now I finally realize there's a whole group of people out there for me. And when you realize that you're touching people's lives like that, you feel not only inspired to speak up, you feel obligated to speak up. Because there's no telling how many people in that household that were in earshot of our conversation have secrets that they can't tell people. And I want everybody in my family to know they have a safe place to come if they have any questions or concerns about gender identity or questions about religion. You don't have to be afraid in my family. And I was making that clear. I explained it all to him. I sent him to watch a few documentaries. he revealed to me that he's the son of a pastor and grew up very religious. And at the end of our conversation, he said he completely understood. And he said that ever since, because what ended up happening was I refused to shake his hand at the end of the night. And that's what got him so upset. And I know I talk a lot on my show about being positive, about being friendly, about extending the olive branch type thing. In this case, my refusal to shake his hand really shocked him. And he said on the phone with me that time, it was several months after this happened, he said, when you wouldn't even shake my hand, it made me think, man, that dude must think I'm really disgusting. Let me look into this. Let me figure out what's going on. So
maybe he deserves a little bit of credit at that point, I guess, for second guessing. I mean, at least, even if it was after the fact, at least. Absolutely.
Well, that's the good news. And the update I have is a very good one. He's here right now. He's here.
That's amazing.
And I talked to him. We have been texting a little bit. He completely apologized, said he was completely out of line. He never should have taken it to that level. He said he's a hothead. He didn't understand my position. And he said when he was talking to me about something that he didn't understand and I did, it made him feel stupid. And when he felt stupid, he got very angry. And that made him lash out. And I told him I understood. I accepted it. And you know what? I've sent him a few news stories. There's been a few trans people, as you know, who have committed suicide recently, and that's been in the news. And every time that happens, I send him a news story. Every time I get an email from someone who's struggling, I cut out their name and contact info, and I just send him a snippet of the story and go, here's another one. And I've just been forwarding him emails. He's never replied. But I sent him a text today before I saw him again because I haven't seen him in a year. I sent him a text, and I said, hey, man, have you been getting my emails? He said, yes. Heartbreaking. I can't believe people are actually treated that way. And so when I saw him today, we shared a big hug. He apologized again. We had Thanksgiving dinner, and it's been a huge, huge progress, huge step in the right direction for everybody in the family because they've all seen him grow over the last year. So it was rough, but it's definitely been for the better.
That's amazing. That's the kind of dialogue that I would love to have with my aunt. And I actually sent you a message on Facebook. I don't know if you remember. I mean, that was obviously a year ago, but, I had, it didn't turn to violence or anything, but, the same kind of just dismissive attitude, not long, after I came out, Thanksgiving time came around and I sent a message to my aunt and, I'm going to be at Thanksgiving. I'm going to be at Christmas. And obviously I dress differently now. I look differently now. I didn't want there to be any surprises or any awkwardness or anything like that. And her response to that message was, I love you too. And I thought to myself, like, well, that's not the worst thing she could have said, but like, I was definitely looking for a little bit more at that point. And, that year Thanksgiving went off kind of without a hitch, but, when last Thanksgiving came around, I sent another update, like, look, I've been on hormones for a while now. Like, I look very different and you've had enough time to adjust to this. So like, it's time. My name is Callie. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to respect that, regardless of whatever your personal feelings may be. And her response back basically was like, I love you, but I'm not going to do that.
Oh, ouch.
And yeah, and that hurt. I mean, it really, really hurt. And, I had this big, long thing typed up that's like, well, then I don't, want to have anything to do with you, blah, blah, blah. Like, getting kind of aggressive and angry. And I definitely felt like I had a right to feel that way. But I was talking to my friend Jamie, who's been on the show before. He was on the Compassion episode 2 weeks ago. I was talking to him about the situation, and he was like, maybe give her one more chance. Maybe really do kind of a hard sell. So that's what I did. So I sent her a message back, and I said, playing on the, because she kept saying, well, I love you and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, since I know you love me, since I know you want me to be happy, here are all of the amazing things that I've been able to do since coming out because I'm comfortable with myself. Like, I'm doing work with nonprofits. I'm doing a podcast that, you know, I get great feedback on and seems to be helping people out. And I work with these local organizations, you know, that do support groups and stuff. And I've been able to do all of these things because I'm finally comfortable with myself. And I'm happy enough with me that I can go out and do these things now. And I thought, like, if that doesn't tug the heartstrings enough to get some sort of conversation going, and she just never responded.
Wow. That's frustrating. That's really frustrating. You know, people sometimes they just don't want to, they don't want to talk about it because they're uncomfortable with, I think, with being wrong. And I think, sadly, that's what a lot of this comes down to. They don't want to be wrong about what they've always believed to be true. So we find the same thing with religion. We find the same thing with politics. You know, I mean, look, if I were to set my dad down and go, look, I know you voted Republican your entire life. Here's why I think that's a bad idea. And I don't think you should be Republican because – immediately all he's doing is trying to come up with reasons why he in fact should stay Republican, right? So what I did instead is, hey, Dad, let's take a test online together. I went to isidewith.com and asked him questions and clicked the answers. And then at the end of it, I went, dude, you're more Democrat than I am. It's not about you getting on my side. It's about you voting with with the policies you actually support.
Right.
I'm just asking him questions. Do you think gays should be able to get married? Well, yeah, it's their business. Okay. How about abortion? Oh, that should definitely be the woman's choice. And we went through a whole line of things. And when I was asking him about, you know, Democrats or Republicans, like, we got to get the Democrats out of office, he was just parroting things other people had told him. So when you approach it as this sort of non-threatening, hey, let's ask some questions type thing, it's much easier. But, you know, for you, it's very personal. It's who you are. And so that's going to be very difficult to remove yourself from that element and make it non-personal. You know, it's one of those things that people don't want to change, because if they change, they have to admit they've been wrong at some point. And for a lot of people, that's very hard to do. I mean, for those of us who have come across the other side and say, yeah, you know, I used to be very religious, or I used to look at atheists and turn my nose up, or I used to be homophobic, or I used to be racist. Once you've crossed that line and you're not anymore, you're very comfortable saying that. But through the process, it's very, very difficult for someone like that to admit that they're wrong. And if they make that change, because see, they think it's about them.
Exactly.
They don't realize that it's not about them. It's about you. And they're like, well, I love you, but I can't do that. You can't do that. Well, what does this have to do with you? This has nothing to do with you.
Exactly.
And you know, when you're not around, that's what they're saying to each other. I just can't refer to her as Callie. I just can't do that. I just can't say Callie, because they know whatever your other name had been. So
right.
For them, they've got it. It's selfish. It's flat out selfish. That's ultimately what it is. They can't look beyond their own selves and respect who you are. That's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. And if you were to say that to them, if you were to say, hey, this isn't about you, to them, that is offensive. You know what I mean?
Well, right. And of course, you know, shock bringing things back around, the two people that I had the most problems with in my family are the two most religious people. You know, and I gave a talk on atheism at an LGBT event, the GLSEN Youth Summit. That's the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. And they do a youth summit in Northern Kentucky every year. And they actually, someone from them reached out to me and, you know, asked if I wanted to do something on atheism, because someone who's part of the organization is also very into atheist activism. And, you know, part of my presentation was like, you know, I'm not at all saying that that, you know, atheists are automatically, you know, more open-minded, more progressive, nicer, moral, better people. But, you know, one thing that I can say for atheists is that most of us weren't always. So at some point in our lives, we've had to change our minds about at least one super, super important thing. So we were able to look at that one thing and say, you know, I was wrong about that, and now here's what I see. So I think I think there's a little something to be said for, you know, we can at least take one step further in saying that, you know, if you're an atheist, maybe you're a little more prone to change your mind on the subject. And conversely, if you're, you know, more of a fundamentalist religious person, the less likely you are to change your mind on a subject like that.
That's a great point. It's not that atheists are smarter, ever. I do not like that concept at all.
No,
it's not that atheists are smarter, but you're right. Most atheists at one time were religious and have had to say, holy moly, I was wrong about something huge. And once you're able to say I was wrong, you get a lot more open to new ideas. And if that makes you smarter, so be it. I don't know how that translates, but it definitely makes you open to new ideas and makes you more fluid in your concepts. And there's one thing I definitely want to make sure I get out before we have to go to break and bring on your next guest. I want to get something out here. I want Christians and atheists alike to stop with this one train of thought. And it's this train of thought that I don't even think they realize how offensive they're being. Normally it's Christians saying it. But a lot of times I hear atheists arguing. A lot of times when people say, oh, well, the atheist wants to argue with the Christian and the atheist wants to argue on behalf of the LGBT community. So they use Jesus as an analogy and say, oh, but Jesus hung out with prostitutes and tax collectors, so we should embrace the atheists and the LGBT community. I hear pastors saying that. Pastor Doug is an awesome guy. He's a very, very sweet guy. But that's one of the things that he said to his congregation is that, oh, well, you know, Jesus hung out with these really broken people. Jesus hung out with these really nasty people. These guys were mean. They were tax collectors, and they – stop it. What you're doing is you're saying we are so awesome and we are so good, we should go talk to the people who are broken and bad and not as good as us, like the atheists, like the LGBT community. And that is extremely offensive. Stop using Jesus as an analogy for this is why we should go talk to people who are broken or messed up in some way.
That's a great point. We have guest callers.
Oh, nice.
Hello, who is this?
Hey, Callie, greeting from the bar room.
What's going on, Bill?
I'm doing great. I want to say happy Thanksgiving and happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm here with Susie and Bobby C and Miss Ashley.
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey.
Wow, the gang's all here. David, can you hear them okay?
Yes, I can.
All right. Yeah.
We'll tell you happy birthday, Callie, and let you know that we're listening and let you know that we love you, honey. And also, Mr. Smalley, it's always a pleasure, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good to talk to all of y'all. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, too.
And we want to know, David, how is it that you know the turkey is done without Jesus?
What?
It's a valid question, David.
I don't believe it is a valid question, Kelly.
How do you know that the turkey is done without Jesus?
That is the most confusing question I've ever been asked in my entire life.
Leave it up to Bill from the barroom atheist.
Is the turkey done? The answer is God.
That's terrible this year. It was awful.
Oh, yeah. It was bad.
It was terrible.
Oh, no, it wasn't. It was awesome.
I have a feeling they started early in the bar room tonight.
Yeah, sounds like it.
I have y'all know it's Sprite and Mountain Dew and water.
Yeah.
Wait, all mixed together? That's got to be horrible.
Yeah.
That's our killer cocktail this evening.
Well, I'll tell y'all happy Thanksgiving, and Callie, happy birthday, and I hope y'all are having a wonderful day. And there's two things that I'm grateful for right now, and that is you two. That would be Mr.
Oh,
Oh, so sweet.
I love you guys.
It
We
was
love
great
you.
to talk to you, and happy Thanksgiving.
You too. Y'all have
All right, guys.
y'all keep having fun.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah, another interesting thing is Skype has this little feature where you can mute all sounds.
right.
We need to.
Yeah.
Side note.
Right. Yeah. We'll work on that. You make a good point though. About how you know what we were talking about before, about how that attitude is actually like, a lot of people see that as like really progressive and forward thinking when it's actually like really, really condescending.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations, and a lot of times, whenever you deal with people who were raised, especially in the South, right, and who want to be nice, you can tell their heart is in the right place. They
Right.
mean well. They're trying to do the right thing, but they slip up and say things that they don't realize is offensive. You know, and that's we kind of have to give them a little leeway and go, okay, because I've been that guy before. I've been that person that has said the wrong thing, and I'm like, look, the best thing I can do is go to someone who's in that community or in that life and say, look, here's a word I've been using. Is that offensive? Is this the right way? How should I approach this?
Right.
And luckily now I have so many people I can reach out to, but a lot of people don't. Right? Like I could text you and be like, hey, Callie, is this appropriate? And you'd be like, yes, or no, jackass, don't ever say that again.
Right, yeah.
And that's cool, right? But a lot of people don't have that. They don't know who to ask. So they're trying to do the best they can. So I understand that their heart is in the right place, but we need to stop that mindset. No, don't accept me because Jesus would. Don't accept Callie because Jesus would also talk to broken people. Accept us because we're human beings. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Accept us in spite of your religion, not because of your religion.
Yeah, I mean, there was this meme that was going around that somebody posted it and they thought like, well, you know, this is a really nice sentiment. And basically it was something along the lines of like, you know, well, if God created everything for a purpose, why did God create atheists? And it was like, the explanation was that God created atheists so people could see examples of people doing good deeds for no reward or no reason at all. So it's like, wow, I exist to teach you a lesson, not because I'm my own person. I have my own life and I have my own, you know, my own purpose, you know, in air quotes, purpose. But God created me to teach you a lesson. Like I don't understand how people don't see how problematic those kinds of statements can be.
I've heard very similar things about children born with disabilities. Very similar thing. Well, you know, they're here because so we'll know how good we have it. Oh my God, that turns my stomach to think about that. That is someone's entire existence. That's their life. That's what they deal with day in and day out. And you brush it off by saying they have a, quote, special place in heaven. What the hell does that mean? Free parking? What does it mean?
Right.
How do you get any more special than heaven, first of all?
Right.
And then second of all, that's just incredibly offensive to that person's adversities that they're dealing with day in and day out. That their entire existence is so you can walk by in a brief moment and go, wow, glad I'm not that guy. Really? How arrogant is that position? And that's why I'm so shocked every time I hear a Christian say that the atheist position is arrogant. Really?
Right. Because
you believe the entire universe was created to be stars in the sky for humans to look up at and go, that's pretty. You think everything was made specifically for this planet. And when you get outside of that mindset, you start to realize it's a pale blue dot. We're nothing compared to everything out there. And and that's what makes us special. That's what makes it interesting to us, is that on this tiny little, you know, speck of dust, as Carl Sagan most beautifully put it, you know, people on one corner of the dot have killed people on the other corner of the dot over over who has the better imaginary friend. It's disgusting. And you know what? Have you ever had people at school that you kind of knew, like you'd walk by and go, I kind of know that person, right? I don't talk to them, but I just walk by them and go, yeah, I know your face and I think I know your first name. And you don't really hang out. You're not friends. But then somehow you find yourself in a place where you don't know anybody. You're out in public, all strangers, They don't know anybody, and you happen to see each other. Then you immediately have a connection. Oh, hey, what's up? Aren't we in fifth period together? Right? Suddenly there's a bonding thing, and now you're like, hey, I want to talk to this person because I don't know any of these other people. This is at least a familiar face. And I think that's why when you let go of religion, you really start to open up your heart to other people, and you really start to embrace your humanism, is because you realize, look, another earthling, right?
Exactly.
Look, someone else. Look, we're alone out here as far as we know. I mean, statistics I know will argue against me, but as far as we know right now, we're alone. And all we have is each other. And so when you let go of religion, you let go of that divisive nature of my God is better than your God. There is no God to fight over. We're all we've got. Let's take care of each other. Let's take care of the planet, and let's love each other. And I think in general, that's why when you become an atheist, shortly thereafter, you end up embracing humanism, and that becomes your way of life. Not atheism. Atheism is not a way of life. It's the answer to one question. But when humanism is your way of life, and you extend that love to other human beings on planet Earth, life just feels more complete. You know, you just feel more accepting. You feel more accepted. You feel more loved. You feel more connected. And it's just a greater understanding, and it puts me at peace and gets me excited about life and what I can do for other people. When I was religious, I didn't feel that way. I wanted to know what I could do for me and my believers, people who agreed with me. How can I help my team get better? Right? It was about furthering our personal belief and our agenda, because God was on our side, and anyone who didn't agree with us was the bad guys. So it created this divisiveness war mentality. And when you let go of your God, you let go of that warrior mentality and realize that we're all in this together.
That is a beautiful sentiment and very apropos to end the segment on. Real quick before we jump to a break here, why don't you give us a quick rundown of what's been going on with Secular Media Group and Dogma Debate?
Will do. We just released our newest intellectual property. It is called Secular News Network. For those listeners of Dogma Debate have heard John for quite a while, John Karff, our news guy, say for Secular News Network, I'm John Karff. Well, what does that mean? What does it really mean to be a part of Secular News Network? Well, we just launched it on Monday, and we did it on purpose on Thanksgiving week because we knew the traffic would be low. We wanted things to be low to kind of get a slow start. Secular News Network is kind of a combination of a couple of things. It used to be Secular News Daily from Secular Coalition for America. If you were a subscriber of Secular News Daily, you're still getting the same news you've always been getting. We acquired that from Secular Coalition for America in a deal with Dogma Debate and SCA, and we just rebranded it completely. We've got more opinion pieces now. Alex Jules is writing for us. JT Eberhard is writing for us. Ryan Bell is writing for us. So basically half of your guest staff today.
Right.
And Lydia Allen, one of my co-hosts, is writing for us. I'm writing. And our editor is Dan Errol, the great and powerful Dan Errol.
Right, love Dan.
Is editor-in-chief of Secular News Network. So, yeah, right now both websites point to it, secularnewsdaily.com and secularnewsnetwork.com. We're slowly going to fade out the Secular News Daily stuff as we bring in more and more writers. And as of a couple of days ago, Jeremiah Bannister with Paleo Radio, who's also on Secular Media Network, is coming on as a writer as well. So we're doing opinion-based blogs as well as news-based reporting. And that is super exciting. So I encourage everyone to go to secularnewsnetwork.com and subscribe and sign up and make sure you come there and post. And we're also looking for more writers. So if you're interested, you can email editor@secularnewsnetwork.com. And outside of that, we just released the Tiny Thinker's first series of the book, Charlie and the Tortoise. And it is available right now for pre-order on Amazon. You just go to Amazon.com and type in Tiny Thinkers. It's the first thing that comes up. It's Charlie and the Tortoise. Cara Santa Maria wrote the foreword for it. It's an awesome science book for kids just in time for the holidays. So tons and tons of people have been ordering it. We're nearly sold out. and the book hasn't arrived yet. So we're already beginning a second run. So it's very exciting stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, my friend Ari in chat just said secular news network, according to John Karp. So yeah, that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, John taught me that a long time ago. Don't say news, you say news.
Well, he's the expert, so we'll defer to him on that one. David, thank you so much for joining me tonight, and we will talk soon, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy Thanksgiving and happy birthday, Kelly.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Hello, I'm Alan Cumming. Live Out Loud is calling on the LGBT community to help improve life for gay teens. Take what you know and gay it forward through the Homecoming Project, a chance to return to your old high school and share your story with LGBTQ youth. Your life experiences and wisdom can prove invaluable to teens who may be struggling with their own identities and paths in life. One day can make a lasting difference. Gay it forward with the Homecoming Project. Find us at liveoutloud.info to learn how you can get involved today.
The staff of Secular Coalition for America lobbies U.S. Congress on issues of separation of church and state, and they've become a powerhouse for change in the United States government. You'll definitely want to subscribe to receive their email action alerts. These are updates for important issues and ones that you can get involved with directly. And hopefully, you'll consider making a contribution to the Secular Coalition for America to help them continue fighting for your equality. You can do it all at secular.org.
Here's an excerpt from Mum, Dad, I'm an Atheist by David G. McAfee.
It is the same highly regarded concept of an afterlife that allows misguided religious people to justify the mistreatment of those who disagree with their religious ideologies. They are simply trying to protect you from eternal damnation in the afterlife by condemning you, insulting you, and even disowning you in this life. It is not to say that becoming open about your disbelief is always going to be met with these negative reactions, and, in fact, that is precisely what this work is hoping to prevent. But it is important to understand that if you experience negative reactions from religious kin, it is probably a result from the religion's teachings, and likely not from any personal vendetta or hatred.
Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist by David G. McAfee is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
Friendsgiving. The chat room is hopping. We got Trav, the Unknown Seaman, the No Religion Required folks, the Barroom Atheist folks, and we had JT Everhard scheduled, and I have not been able to get a hold of JT, so I'm going to tell a story real quick about the reason that this whole thing started in the first place. If anybody wants to call in on Skype, the line is open, and I'm just going to throw it out there. My Skype name is Hold Fast Hope 513. So if anybody wants to call in and chat until or in place of JT, if we're not able to get a hold of him, please feel free to do so. I've got the line unmuted, so you'll ring in as soon as you call. But so I kind of want to tell the story behind why this is a thing in the first place. And I talked a little bit about in the last segment about my experience with my aunt and my grandma, and I don't really know how my uncles feel about my transition, and I'm not sure that I really care, all of that much, to be honest. Not because I don't like them or I think they're bad people. We've just never been close because we never really had a lot in common. So, things were awkward. Things were awkward with my aunt because of the messages that I talked about in the last segment here. And things were kind of awkward between my grandma and I because my grandma, I don't want to say bad things about my grandma. She is most certainly a product of her generation and, someone who tries very hard, but she has God blinders on. And so that made it really tough for her to accept my transition and my situation. So, last year I was actually living with my grandma, as was my mom, and it wasn't the best living situation. We're all very different people, not my mom and I, but my grandma and I and my mom and my grandma, just very different people. And without going into a huge amount of detail, the living situation was not exactly ideal. And so Mom and I just decided to kind of skip Thanksgiving last year, but living in the house with her, I mean, we didn't exactly have a place to go necessarily. So I spent last Thanksgiving in my bedroom sleeping. And when people would ask, hey, what did you do for Thanksgiving? Did you have a good time? And I would joke and just say, oh, I spent Thanksgiving sleeping because I was tired and family stuff's awkward. And so I just slept, and I pretended that it didn't hurt to do that, and that I was, that I was the one choosing not to be with my family, which was true, but that didn't make it not hurt. And so when I was, brainstorming episode ideas, and I got to thinking about the idea of family and, the things that LGBT and atheist folks, and I mean, lots of other people too, for other various different reasons, the things that we go through with our families and because of our families. And I just wanted to make sure that, no one else, had to go through what I did, and that we, provide a place to go. I think we have somebody trying to call here. Let's see what's going on. Skype noises. Hello?
Hey.
What's going on, sir?
What's up? This is Chris.
Chris, it's Callie.
Hey, I'm sorry.
This is Chris, the Seethin' Heathen from the Unbuckling the Bible Belt podcast. How are things?
They are just chilling. I've already had my dinner with my parents earlier, so
yeah.
Had to work the second job, so.
Oh God, 2 jobs. That's terrible. So what's is there any awkwardness or weirdness in your family for Thanksgiving?
Not really.
If I can just go ahead and ask you an intensely personal question without asking permission to do so first.
No, that's fine. Not really. I mean, my family's kind of separate. My dad's up in Charlotte. My mom is down here, and my other grandmother, the grandparents on my mom's side are dead, and we used to do it with them, so it's not quite the same without them.
Yeah.
And my other grandmother, I don't really speak to that much, not for any other reason, just I never was that close to that side of the family. But my brother's over there, so it's just a weird kind of separate situation.
That is a little odd. So what else has been going on? What's going on with Unbuckling the Bible Belt and you in general? Just we don't get the chance to talk very often. How are life things and podcast things going?
Well, I kind of took a step back a little bit from the podcast itself. I'm doing mostly just the editing, producing, and stuff like that. But I did do an interview this last episode with Ishmael Brown.
I love Ishmael.
Yeah, from Angry Black Rant, and I could talk to that guy for hours. he's just awesome.
Well, he's hilarious, and he's incredibly intelligent, super sharp-witted. Like, the first time I met him was actually on the Imaginary Friends show. And we'll have my friend Trav Mamone on here in just a second. We've got you on hold, Trav. I met him on the Imaginary Friends show, which is now the Ingenious Friends show. And it was awesome because I'd been hearing about his show and, Angry Black Rant. I mean, that's like my favorite podcast title ever. So I was really excited to meet him and get to talk to him. And he, contributed for the Trans Day of Remembrance episode. So yeah, I was excited to get to talk to him.
Yeah. The show now, we got, Joe still on there, but now we got a new co-host, Sharon Bush.
Stop it.
I didn't pick it, they picked it. It's the same joke name as Joe Kindick, and
right.
She kind of gives a pretty. She's from Georgia. She gives it a little more female perspective. And
right.
This last episode, she interviewed a lawyer about the Supreme Court case that's coming up that's challenging the abortion clinic restrictions in Texas, I believe it is.
Oh man, that's awesome. We'll have to make sure we check that out.
So that's definitely something to check out and keep an eye on. We're trying to get towards more a social, social justice warriors.
I was going to say, just say it.
I'm so sick of this pejorative use of the word. What's wrong with social justice, man?
Right.
Shit. Oh, shoot, sorry.
No, that's okay. My understanding is that shit is okay under PG-13. Maybe Bobby and Miss Ashley can correct us in the chat room if they're paying attention. I'm not sure. I think that one's kind of on the borderline there.
Right. Well, I apologize regardless.
No, you're cool. So, real quick, let us know where we can find Unbuckling the Bible Belt.
We're on Facebook at /Unbuckling the Bible Belt. Of course, we're on Stitcher, iTunes. You can tweet at Season Heathen, at UTBB Sharon Bush, or at Joe Kindick for the hosts. And we have a new host too, at Adam Fusion is his name. I don't know if he has a Twitter yet.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to us, Chris, and all the best to you. Everybody check out the podcast. It's a good one. And I'm especially looking forward to that interview.
All right, man. Take care.
Thanks. Now we have Trav Mamone. Trav, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing okay.
Sir/ma'am. Sorry.
I go by either one. Doesn't really matter. I'm genderqueer.
Okay.
For those who don't know, listening folks out there.
Yes, Trav is the host of the By Any Means podcast. Another amazing social justice warrior friend of mine. How are things?
Oh, things are good. Now, about that social justice warrior thing. I was talking to Paul from the Q podcast,
right.
And he keeps telling me that I'm not a social justice warrior because I'm willing to have conversations with people instead of act like an asshole. So maybe that's the difference between, like, I don't know, a social justice warrior and a legit activist. I don't know. But I'm still keeping my social justice warrior T-shirt, Paul. If you're listening.
Yeah, I think I made a joke Facebook post once that I was gonna get SJW tattooed on my forehead. So tell us about the podcast. What's been going on with By Any Means, and Shujin, if you want to call in, I see you in the chat there. Once Trav and I are done, my Skype name is HoldFastHope513. So you can just give me a call on the Skypes once Trav and I are done here. So yeah, go ahead with By Any Means. Talk to me about what's going on.
Well, I have a really good interview that's going to be posted tomorrow morning that discusses the big topic within the atheist movement nowadays. I know it's not about whether or not college students are too sensitive. It's the other big topic we're all talking about right now, Islam.
Oh, good. So talk to me a little bit about that. Is it just more of a discussion of like, if, does Islam actually promote terrorism and that kind of stuff, or?
Yeah. I talked to a friend, Kieran Opal, about it, and it is like, it's going to be amazing. I think I'm going to like email it to basically everybody and be like, you got to listen to this, okay?
Right.
Sam Harris, you better listen to this, okay?
I'm not sure that he listens to anyone. No, I just, in fairness, I haven't listened to the episode of his podcast, but I have heard that there are some pretty awful things about trans folks in the latest episode of his podcast. So I'm not exactly. Yeah, a friend of mine, I saw somebody, a friend of mine post on Facebook about how there was somebody who was, it wasn't actually Sam himself, but it was somebody who was on his show just being very derisive of how much attention issues surrounding transgender stuff gets. And they were basically just talking about how silly it is that people are arguing over pronouns when, people are being blown up in the Middle East. Oh
God!
And in fairness, that was a Facebook post about the podcast, so I can't vouch for the actual content of the show. In fairness to all, so I can't, I can't, speak directly with experience, but given how like he seems to kind of only care about one thing, that wouldn't exactly surprise me, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder how a neuroscientist somehow became the preeminent scholar on all things Islam, Well,
there's a point to be made for that. But did you see the comment I left on your Facebook page?
Yeah. We all, and it is true. We all sometimes think we're like experts in subjects that we're not really, we never really went to school for.
Well, right, and you don't have to be credentialed in a thing to know a lot about it. I mean, I'm not a political science major, but I feel like I do okay with politics, and right. I'm not a biologist, but I know the basics in biology, and that's all fair. But I do see where you're coming from too.
Yeah. So, that's going up tomorrow, and I hope to have some pretty good guests in the future. I know in a couple weeks I'll be having Misbehaving and Demand a Right from Promoting Secular Feminism.
Oh, my God. Seriously, hang on a second. I've played their promo on my show before, but Promoting Secular Feminism, if podcasts are your thing, which if you're listening to this, I have to guess they are, Promoting Secular Feminism is a great show. Super relevant, super culturally competent, and hilarious. So big fans of that show.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to mention something real quick. This doesn't have anything to do with podcasting, but I just want to give a shout out to all the people out there listening who brought their quote unquote friends to Thanksgiving dinner. And you know what I mean, right? When I say quote unquote friends.
I'm not sure.
Oh, I mean, basically, they brought their lovers to Thanksgiving dinner, but said, no, they're just a friend of mine,
Oh, okay. You're talking about folks who came in on the down low. Like, this is my friend.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. I hear you.
So, and I also want to give a shout out to all the trans folks who are basically forced to present as cis during Thanksgiving dinner. So I just want to say, hopefully, for all of you out there, hopefully you all will eventually find yourself in an environment where you can be free to be who you are,
Absolutely. And well, so, on the topic of family, talk to me about, is there lots of, if I can ask, obviously, is there awkwardness or anything in your family surrounding atheism or surrounding, gender identity or anything like that?
Kind of, sort of. I mean, not to the point where, like, they see me as the black sheep. They kind of just look at me and be like, that's his thing now. Everyone, kids these days, they all have a thing, and that's Trav's thing, whatever.
Oh, that's really dismissive.
Well, let's face it. Not too many people really get the concept of being in the middle of the gender spectrum, so I don't know. I get the sort of impression that they're kind of like, okay, whatever you say.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think like, well, and of course I don't want to assume that they're accepting of binary, binary trans people either. It boggles my mind that people can accept that like a person can jump from one side of the binary to the other, but not be somewhere in between. Like, if you're not going to fit on either side, it would stand to reason to me that there are many different ways for one to not fit on either side. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay. They're totally cool with me being bisexual, though.
Okay, so they're a little open-minded.
Yeah. I think it's because more people know about bisexuality than genderqueerness.
Gotcha. Well, Trav, tell us real quick where folks can find your podcast and find more about you and stuff. I've seen Hugh trying to call and Shujin wants to call in, so I wanna get them in here in the next 10 minutes or so.
Sure. You just go to www.byanymmeans.com, and that's by spelled B-I.
Awesome. Well, Trav, thanks for calling in. Thanks for spending your time with us here, and thanks for all you do. I love you lots, and take care of yourself. Okay.
All right, love you too. Bye.
All right, let's see if we can get Mr. Shujin Tribble on the line here. I'm going to call you. I'm going to beat you to it. We'll see if he's around. We're just doing it informal here for the next 10 minutes or so. Where is he at? Because I saw Shujin ask first. But if I don't get him, I'm going to move on and I'm going to talk to Hugh. Nothing. You lose. I love you, Shujin. Hugh Man, welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto, my friend.
How are you, beautiful?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I am great, and happy birthday.
Thank you. So how we're
happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, there's that other thing. So how were things? How was Thanksgiving for you?
Thanksgiving for me was great. I am one of the lucky ones. We went to visit my parents last night. Were welcomed with a dinner just for us, and of course today the entire family arrived. We had a fantastic lunch. After which we drove home, and we're back home in Atlanta with a whole lot of love from grandparents, parents, brothers, sisters, cousins. We are the lucky ones. So very, very, very privileged there.
That's awesome. I'm super, super glad to hear that. Shout out to
Tom.
the other Mr. Human.
The other man, Tom. Well, he is actually sitting here right now. And by the way, I am. He's not aware because he's working, but I am live on Callie's show as we speak. So he looks at me like, no, I don't want to talk. So anyway.
Well, tell him we love him.
But I will tell you one real interesting thing. I shared this with you last night. I just shot you a quick little message. And as we celebrate things we're thankful for, and as we celebrate you being one of those things, we were talking last night about a situation he has at work with a particular person that they aren't, getting along so well, and they are working on it. And he said, well, to quote Kelly Wright, once you get to know someone's story, or you can't hate someone once you get to know their story. So I am trying to get to know her story. So not only are you impacting the atheist and the gaytheist world, you are impacting the entire world in all situations. And thank you. And we celebrate you, and we are grateful that you are a part of this journey we're on.
Man, you're going to make me cry, Hugh. live on my own show.
So thank you, and happy birthday.
Well, thank you. Hugh is a perfect example of the family you choose, and being closer and having more love for your chosen family sometimes than some of your blood relatives. He's a special fella. We'll just say that.
Well, you are a very special young lady, and I think my grandfather always said, birds of a feather flock together, and someone as amazing as you is going to find yourself surrounded by other people who are loving and caring just like you. So it's your own damn fault.
Well, you know what? I'll go ahead and own that. I'll take that.
Oh, okay. Well, I know others are wanting to call in, but I just wanted to personally say happy birthday and say that you are one of my thanks and I love you dearly.
Oh, thank you, Hugh. I love you, and we will talk soon.
Okay. Kisses. Bye.
Bye. Man, this is awesome. Let me see if I can get Shujin on the line now. I saw him say something about all being fixed in the chat room here. There he is. Mr. Shujin Tribble, how are you?
I'm doing good, hon. How are you?
I am fantastic. How was Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving went well. One of the things that I wanted to let you know about, I don't know how much you'd known about my particular past. We lost my wife 10 years ago this past May.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, since I am up here in Buffalo and my closest actual brother is an hour and a half away in Rochester, my family in-laws have kept me all this time as family. So we get the chance to go out to my sister-in-laws, and it's nice to be able to have that. So that's why when you were saying that you were going to be doing this particular show, it kind of resonated for me a bit, even though it's not nearly for the same reason.
Right. I hear you. That's amazing to hear, because, you hear so often when, tragedies like that happen, you kind of fall apart. And even if you had been previously close, sometimes, we like to talk about how sometimes tragedy can bring people close together, but, unfortunately, sometimes it can take people apart too. It's amazing to know that didn't happen in your case.
Yeah, well, at least on that part. For me, right, even though it's 10 years on, Hugh saying how much he uses and using the word love, mm-hmm, that's a word that is still, even 10 years later, I have a hard time being able to utilize, except for a handful of people. Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those things. So that's why I wanted to say thank you. Of course, happy birthday. I joke about continuing to be 39. I sincerely hope when you finally reach it, it looks good for you. The only downside is that you're going to have to jump over to 40 because I got here first, so tough.
39's taken.
Yes,
Gotcha.
It is.
Well, I am a ripe old 31 today, so I got a little bit of time before I catch up.
Oh, good. I don't have to worry about moving anytime soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you for calling in. Tell us real quick, Shujin is the host of Holy Crap, the Vlogcast. Tell us real quick, plug your show for me.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's holycrapthevlogcast.com, and all the links that you can find are all for there. Not a big deal. Callie, fortunately, has had the opportunity of being on a couple of my shows fairly recently, so if you go looking back through the back catalog on YouTube, you can find it there. And the podcast feed will give it to you. And thank you so much for kind of opening your house for everybody like this, hon.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. This is I'm doing what I love on my birthday, and that's the best present for me, I think. So yeah, definitely check out Holy Crap the Vlogcast. It's always a lot of fun, always great discussions, lots of super intelligent folks. Definitely check it out.
Wait a minute. Wait.
lots of idiots that I hate, who are really dumb and just terrible people, except for Shujin. How's that?
Enough about the imaginary friend show. Let's just move on.
The what show? That doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I know, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that to him anyway. Why?
Right.
Because I'm going to come up with every other name possible.
Right. I'm still sticking with Igneous Friends Show, so.
That works out for me. It's all the heat in the world.
Exactly. Well, thanks for calling in, Shujin. I love you.
Thanks, hon, and
Take care.
Take care of yourself. I can't wait to see you sometime.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye, all.
What a cool segment, talking to all my friends. I love you guys. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back on the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Here's an excerpt from Nailed by David Fitzgerald.
Didn't there have to have been a Jesus? Perhaps he was just a wandering teacher or an exorcist, an apocalyptic prophet or a zealot who opposed the Romans. Perhaps he was all these things, or even a composite of several such early first-century figures. But at any rate, surely there had to be somebody at the original core of Christianity, arguably the most famous individual in human history. All this seems to be a perfectly reasonable, completely natural assumption to make, so why would anyone be so foolish as to propose that Jesus never existed? Doesn't it just make more sense to assume that there was a historical Jesus, even if we're unable to recover the real facts about his life and death? As it turns out, no. The opposite is true. The closer we look at the evidence for Jesus, the less solid evidence we find, and the more we find suspicious silences and curious resemblances to the pagan and Jewish religious ideas and philosophies that preceded Christianity. And once you begin to parse out the origins of this tradition or that teaching from their various sources, the sweater begins unraveling quickly until it becomes very difficult to buy that there ever was, or even could have been, any historical figure at the center.
Nailed by David Fitzgerald is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in physics, I learned that I'm a loser.
Today in school, I learned that I'm ugly and useless. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. In history, I learned that I'm trash.
Today in school, I learned that I have no friends.
In biology,
In English, I learned that I make people sick. And at lunch, I learned that I sit on my own because I smell. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me.
In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. And in math, I learned that I'm trash.
The only thing I didn't learn in school today?
The only thing I didn't learn today.
The only thing I didn't learn
is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov.
Before we jump back into the show, it's time to thank our patrons. This week we're recognizing Justin. Thank you so much for believing in us enough to contribute to us financially and for being a part of this movement. Patrons of the Gaytheist Manifesto have access to all sorts of cool stuff, like a big shout out on the show, premium content, including an audio journal I've decided to keep documenting the more personal stuff I don't dive into on the show, and an exclusive patrons only hangout once a month. If you're so inclined, head over to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto to become a part of this movement and support the show. Thank you. And welcome back to the Gaytheist Manifesto. We're having a party for Thanksgiving tonight, just hanging out with some of our chosen family. The chat room's going, lots of folks in the chat room. And this half hour, we are talking to Heina Dadabhoy. Heina, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
So you know, if we can go there, let's talk about family a little bit. You know, as you know, as an atheist, as one of those aforementioned social justice warriors, how does that thing usually work out for you during holidays?
Well, I mean, it's better now than it's been in many years. When I first came out as an atheist, they were not very happy, and every family occasion there was a lot of snark, a lot of, you know, ostracization. There was a lot of, you know, with families like mine, which come from a more communal-based culture, they'll never kick you out, but they'll make it so hard that you'll want to leave, and then they'll blame you for it. Yeah, that's how they do. When we were little, even, my friends would say, "Oh, my parents are threatening to kick me out." I'm like, my parents are threatening to never let me out of the house. That's what they're threatening to do. There's this, yeah, that's just kind of how, with my Indian background and Muslim background, like that's how our families work. They would never kick a child out, but they would make their life a living hell instead if they don't obey. But it's gotten much better in recent years. I think they've sort of mellowed out. So have I. I mean, frankly, I've learned to sort of pick my battles and things like that. Even though I'm right, I'm still right? But,
well, yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. But there's times to speak up and there's times to not. Even though some people claim I still speak up too much, whatever. What do you do? There's a lot of not saying things. There's a lot of not participating in conversations. There's a lot of being oblique, I think, that goes into being, queer and, genderqueer and non-monogamous and an atheist and a former member of the religion that your family's a part of.
Are there any things that you haven't hit that are like part of the, like, we don't want to have anything to do with you group?
I don't know. I mean, there are probably other things that I'm not thinking of. I mean, there's some things that I wouldn't tell. You don't generally tell family anyway, like being kinky, things like that. Like, why would you tell your family that?
Yeah.
Some people do. Okay, more power to them, but most people don't. It's like a separate thing.
Right.
But and I feel like it's almost worse now for us because before there was no reason to talk about queer issues because that was sort of whispered about. It was not openly talked about. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing that, queer awareness and LGBT awareness is becoming more of a thing. But now that, there are people all over the news with all these things, the conversations come up even with conservative families like mine who don't talk about these things.
Right.
How are they supposed to ignore the Supreme Court decision? How are they supposed to ignore, Caitlyn Jenner? They can't, and it's going to come up. And then, there's me trying to bite my tongue so hard that it's nearly in half.
Right. Well, so let me ask about that because a lot of times you hear in, arguments over anti-discrimination laws or whatever that, you can't force people to progress by, changing laws or whatever. But I think you make a really valid point. And then when those things happen, like you're kind of forced into having the conversation where you might have just been content to just pretend that whole thing never existed in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Because
they have to face it.
Well, right. Well, the thing that I had always thought is like for me, it's like it's not even about them. It's about if we're not going to have social protections, we're going to at least have legal protections. And there's the argument that can push people further away because you're forcing it on them or whatever. But I guess that's kind of making the argument that forcing it on them in a way maybe not be the worst thing to do.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, if they're gonna find ways to be legally discriminatory. Of course they are.
Right.
We live in a society with enough freedom and protections that if you hide your tracks as far as your discriminatory behavior, you can get off scot-free. I've been fired for reasons to do with size and with gender, and I know that was why, but they had things that everybody else were doing as to why. But as far as the state is concerned and the government is concerned, well, that's what they fired you for, and you can't quote unquote prove that it was for other reasons. So I think the argument that it forces them is dubious in the first place.
Right.
But I mean, it does force them to confront it, and I think it does signal to them that they might be on the wrong side of things, and that makes them supremely uncomfortable. And I know personally, even in my family, even with some of the more religious people, what ended up happening is when they see the sea change happening around them, when they see same-sex marriage, becoming a thing, and trans people, becoming far more visible and open and celebrated even, they've gone from, wow, those people are terrible and we hate them, and in, a religious state, they'd be dead. They go from saying and thinking horrible things like that to saying, oh, well, that's okay for them. It's okay for those people. That's what they do. And, they're human beings too. You'll hear that a lot too. They'll say, oh, they're human. Right. It's fine. But of course, the caveat being, if it was somebody in their own family, they would not be okay with it.
Right. Of course. Well, so,
but, that's where,
Right. So one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on is because I didn't want to have just white folks with a Judeo-Christian background talking about family and different things that we experience as atheists, as queer people, as people who care about social justice and who are generally liberal, because even just that on its own can throw wedges in between families. And in your background, you came from a Muslim family and used to be Muslim yourself, right?
Yup, very much so.
So, can you talk about ways those things affect that that might be unique to your experience that some of us may not be aware of?
Well, there's a double-edged sword with the racism, because we always hear the story of the SJW going home to their mostly white family and getting to hear racist Uncle Bob talking about how terrible Obama is and how he's a socialist or whatever. We don't have that as much in my family. Like, there's not as much of that kind of racism, but there is sort of, we're better than those other kinds of non-white people racism that gets my goat.
Gotcha.
Oh, it really gets my goat. Like, because my family were immigrants, and in fact, my dad and some of his family were refugees, straight up refugees. Mm-hmm. They'll say, oh, well, we came here with just the shirts on our backs, and why can't, I'm just going to use their phrasing. They're not slurs, but the way they say it is so dehumanizing. It's not really the word, it's their tone. They're like, the blacks and the Mexicans can do the same. They're from here,
Right.
They've been here for how many generations, and the Mexicans just cross the border, and they can't achieve the level of success that we have, and why can't they? It's a classist sort of thing, really. And so that's one of the differences, is that racism is person of color against person of color, which reads very differently.
Right.
There's also, before 9/11, most Muslims were Republican because of conservative values.
Sure.
Family values and things like that, as they call them, quote unquote. But now most Muslims have flipped entirely for understandable reasons.
Yeah.
But even at the same time that they remain very socially conservative. So sometimes you feel that tension coming out where, yes, they voted Democrat for almost everything, but they voted yes on Proposition 8 or whatever.
Right.
So the conversation on certain things is totally fine. I agree with them. We're fine. They're not saying horrible things. But then their guilt about, I guess, having voted in a way that they thought was against some of their morality comes out when they start, lambasting or berating things that are more left that they don't agree with. There's also a very strong anti-communist sentiment in my family that comes from my family being refugees from a communist country.
Mm-hmm.
Really more fascist, but under the guise of communism.
Right.
Because of some of my origins coming from there, there's a very strong socialism is bad, communism is bad. If we socialize medicine, guess what's going to happen? We're all going to end up refugees again. And on the one hand, I don't know what it's like to be a refugee, so, what can I say? Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, single-payer system is not going to suddenly make communism happen, so...
Right. Well, it's anything that's even a little bit socialist is totally socialist.
Right.
And...
Full totalitarian socialism, somehow.
Right.
And there's also, there are a lot of topics that are of political discussion in my family don't necessarily come up unless it's on the news with families that aren't Muslim, but Muslim families talk about certain things a lot. Like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict comes up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And while pretty much everybody, I can actually confidently say everybody in my family is firmly pro-Palestinian, there are nuances in that conversation that come out that are really interesting for me to just listen to, because it's not, oh, I'm pro-Israel and I'm pro-Palestine and we're going to fight about it. It's we're all on the same side here. We all ultimately agree, but there's like subtle nuances to this political issue that we can talk about. It's the same feeling I get from certain, atheist events where we all agree on one basic thing. Now we can actually talk about some nuance. So that's actually a good thing, I think. It can be very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and let me ask this too, because Thanksgiving is generally considered to be a Christian holiday. Is Thanksgiving even a thing in your family, really?
It's not really a Christian. I mean, it's really an American holiday. I would say,
right.
U.S. American.
Well, Christians have appropriated it, we'll say,
yes.
as being their own.
Oh, they have. Well, for a long time, my family didn't really do proper Thanksgiving. Well, first of all, proper, I mean, like, the turkey and all that, because they weren't, they just didn't know how on the one hand. And later when my family got more religious, because when I was really little, they weren't that religious, and they got more religious. They didn't want to celebrate it because Muhammad said that you shouldn't celebrate the holidays that were started and celebrated by non-Muslims. And so for the same reason, we didn't celebrate birthdays or anything either, because that was, what non-Muslims did, and it had no Islamic basis. And, we said we Muslims have our Islamic holidays, and that's all we celebrate. So, but we would get together on Thanksgiving anyway, because everyone's off work and school.
Right.
So we would have just like a dinner at somebody's house, but it was our same old dinner, curries and naan and all that stuff. And then we kids, quote unquote, we're not really kids anymore, my generation, but we were kids back then, teenagers and children, decided that we wanted to do a more American style Thanksgiving. And so we threw kids Thanksgiving, and we had so much fun, and the food turned out so well that our parents got jealous of us and said, "Can we come to your party?" And we said yes, under one condition: no curry, none. Not a single one. You're going to have to eat this American food and not complain about how it's not spicy enough, or how it's not, it doesn't have enough gravy or curry. Because they have it in their heads that all non-Indian food is just dry and bland, and it doesn't have enough spice or curry or whatever.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's actually worked pretty well. Like, they've come to like it, and, we've tried different things and, tried different things out, and it's been fun. But yeah, now we do a pretty traditional Thanksgiving, except that ours is bigger and louder than most Thanksgivings because there's just more of us.
Well, right, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, how does your family handle, your activism and your outspokenness and all of that kind of stuff? I mean, does it cause conflict?
It did when it first started, and people were reporting me to my parents like they didn't know, which my parents already kind of knew. We operate really under a don't ask, don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't talk about it, Someday I won't be able to say don't ask, don't tell, because in subsequent generations they won't know what that means, right?
Well, right, yeah.
It's no longer a thing.
Right.
But for now I can describe it that way. We just don't talk about it. It doesn't come up. They talk about religion, and I just don't participate in the conversation because the majority of them, or perceived majority really, are Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we do, and we mostly just talk about other stuff. And I'm not technically, I mean, they could Google me and find out whatever, but I'm not technically out to them about several things. I mean, I'm out to them about being an atheist, but there are other things about me that they don't know about technically. So
Gotcha.
That makes it more comfortable in some ways. And it bothers me that that's the case, because I like to be out and about and proud and all that. But at the same time, it can feel like starting a fight for no reason, because me coming out to them as pansexual is not going to necessarily change their mind about anything. Because I know that for a fact, because one of my cousins confronted me. She Googled some screen name of mine a long time ago, and she found out that I was talking about my attractions to women. And her reaction was to keep me from her children for a while because she thought I might molest them.
Jesus.
Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't come out as a pedophile. Like, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
I like adults that are not my cousin's children, maybe.
Wow.
But yeah, no, she got over it. I think part of it is because she didn't have to see it, so she didn't care.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I mean, there's something to be said for picking your battles sometimes. If if you're in what appears to be a heterosexual relationship and you don't see anything like that changing, if it doesn't change the way that you interact with that person, there's something to be said for saying, like, well, maybe I can just not let grandma know that I'm polyamorous and I have sex with lots and lots of people all over the place. Like, maybe grandma doesn't have to know that.
Yeah, and I mean, I've stood my ground on enough things to where I don't feel too guilty about it. When they found out about my husband, my grandma asked me, "Oh, are you going to make him Muslim and make him?" Because to become a Muslim, you just have to declare you're a Muslim, essentially.
Wow, that's like the easiest religion ever.
Oh no, but then you're supposed to practice it to prove you are. But
okay, all right.
Nobody really checks in. Like a lot of people, a lot of men a lot of men who have married the women in my family have fake converted to marry, because in Islam, a man can marry a non-Muslim woman, but a Muslim woman can't marry a non-Muslim man. It's not a valid marriage.
Right, of course, yeah.
She's just like an adulteress and a whore or whatever they call her names. So a lot of guys will fake convert to marry these women in my family. And basically my grandma thought, and even my mom thought at one point that I was going to do that. And I'm like, I've been out to you as an atheist for a long time now. This is not a new thing. This is not a new fad or phase. I came out to them in 2006. So they have had time to let it set. So I said, no, I'm not going to make him pretend like he's Muslim to Islamically marry me, the atheist.
Right.
We got legally married. We're married as far as the eyes of the law are concerned. And you are concerned because as far as we are concerned, we are. So what are you going to do about it? And to their credit, they have, they have accepted him, and he came with me today and everything. And they're doing well with it. I think my mom was just worried that I would, die a spinster or something. I don't know. Indian moms. Because, she had 2 daughters above the age of 24 who were unmarried. So, she was worried.
Oh, right. Because...
we would be past our expiration date or something.
Well, when were you expected to be married by?
I think by at least 24, 25, or at least start saying that I was ready to marry so that they could find me a nice boy or whatever.
Right.
And my grandma wanted it even earlier, because my grandma on my dad's side, my dad is her youngest child, and a lot of her grandkids on that side are not married. And I think she was worried that I would never get married, and then, she would have to die with the shame of so many unmarried granddaughters or whatever.
Man.
So she started with me pretty young. At 21, 22, I was done with college. She's like, well, now that you have your degree, the next step is clearly to get married, right? And I said, no, not really, not necessarily. Especially since, there are people in my family, extended family too, that have married pretty young and then gotten divorced pretty quickly. Partially because of family pressure. They're not supposed to date, they're not supposed to have sex, so then they just get married and then they get divorced.
Right. So Shujin asked a question in chat, and I think it's actually a great question to ask. He says, what about making it a non-issue, treating your status, whatever it might be, as a, yeah, I am whatever, and ? And I think there's definitely something to be said for that. But, but at the same time, for in my case, for example, I had to explain why I was wearing a dress to Thanksgiving and why I had makeup on instead of gym shorts and a t-shirt and a beard. And it involved me, asking them to use a different name and different pronouns and stuff like that. Yeah. So sometimes you can do that, and sometimes that's the thing to do, but sometimes you don't really have that choice.
With me being an apostate of Islam, me becoming an atheist, I took my headscarf off. Mm-hmm. And while the big reveal of me being an atheist was a big reveal to my parents, with my extended family, it wasn't a big reveal. I just showed up at one big family party without a headscarf on, and I treated it like a non-issue, mm-hmm. and so everybody else did too. So I did take that tack for that. As far as being queer, even before I was with my partner now, or even while I was with him, in my family, you don't bring a partner around, even if you're straight and monogamous, you don't bring a partner around unless you're engaged to get married soon.
Huh.
It's considered to be almost like flaunting that you're having sex. Look at this person I'm boning, check him out. It's dirty and gross. Why would you do that? You're only supposed to bring people around if you are about to marry them, which they consider to be that you're serious.
Right.
So there was never any woman that I dated that I was that serious about. And with Danny, they didn't find out about him until after we'd been married for almost 2 years. So, yeah, I'm not even kidding you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was a big reveal. Hey, we eloped 2 years ago. No big deal. And so, there would be my point is there would be no natural way for me to reveal that I was queer.
Mm-hmm.
What would I say? Oh, hey, if, we were watching TV and they're like, oh, she's so pretty. I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'd love to hit that. No, There's just no, with my prudish conservative family, there's no natural way to reveal that I'm pansexual or polyamorous, really.
Right. Yeah, which
no
is fair.
way.
Yeah. Well, and again, even if you're generally a person who's open about that kind of thing, that's not usually a discussion you have with your parents anyway. So you can,
Exactly.
I think you can kind of safely leave that out without feeling like a sellout.
I mean, if we were the kind of family that you brought around people that you were dating without necessarily like being engaged or whatever, then sure, like I might have brought around a girlfriend or something, but like it's just not how it works with my family.
Right. Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I would have, though, if I had ended up, getting married to a woman. I would have dealt with the repercussions of that. I made that promise to myself a long time ago, but that's just not how it worked out, because part of that is just statistics, right?
Well, right, yeah. If you're into several different genders, there's an availability
there are more
thing.
People
Yeah.
that are into different genders than the same gender.
Right, yeah. The pool is smaller.
And lesbians often don't take too kindly to bisexuals.
Right, which that's yeah. I'm very
we could
lucky.
probably have another show about just that.
Yes, we could have taken up this whole 2-hour thing on not queer enough, not trans enough, and that's an episode that's gonna happen for sure.
All right.
But yeah, and I'm lucky in that my circle of queer and trans friends, that doesn't seem to be an issue. But I have definitely seen that, like, oh, bisexual is not really a thing. Like you're just confused. You need to pick one, or you haven't found the right girl or the right guy yet, and then you'll decide.
And then if you do, have a relationship with someone of one, then they assume you've picked or decided. It's like, it's like if you're attracted to people of multiple races, do you suddenly become a white supremacist if you are with a white person? Like, no, that's not how that works.
Oh, that's a fantastic analogy.
Yeah, I mean, just what? That's not how that works.
Oh, that's amazing. I am going to use that from now on. Thank you for that.
It's not original. I've read it somewhere somehow, but yeah, I've taken it to an extreme, which I think is fun.
Awesome. Well, Heina, tell everybody where we can find more about you online, where you can find your blog and all that sort of fun stuff.
You can find me on Free Thought Blogs at freethoughtblogs.com/heinous. My blog is called Heinous Dealings. You can Google just my first name, Heina, and find everything in its mother about me. Yeah, I am my own brand because of my weird name. Yeah, I'm on Twitter.
Oh, did I lose you?
I'm all over the interwebs.
Wait, I lost you for a second when you said your Twitter handle.
Oh, I just said Twitter, at Heinous Dealings, just like my blog.
Awesome. And Ari, I know I'm not sexually attracted to llamas. Thank you. Yeah, that's a thing in the chat room. The people listening are gems. I love them all.
My parents have a beautiful llama, though. I'm not even kidding.
Oh, you serious? See, okay, all right. We were going to go to break, but you brought this up, and technically I have 3 hours, not 2, to broadcast. So if we need to push this back, that's okay. I met a guy who lives in Cincinnati who owns a llama farm. Or I'm sorry, it's an alpaca farm. They're two different things. I know. But like most adorable thing in the world, and he turns out to be this nutso libertarian, like right-wing paranoid conspiracy theory like freak. And I'm like, I can't come to your alpaca farm now because I'm scared of you.
Well, if you're ever in Southern California, you can see my parents' llama. Her name is Misty, and she is very sweet and very pretty.
Oh, I'm totally gonna take you up on that.
But please don't be attracted to her.
No. Yeah, it's a gender thing. It's not cross species. I'm good. All right. Well, Heina, thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk soon.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure. Yes. All right. Happy Global Day, everyone.
Here's an excerpt from Powerless No Longer by Peter W. Soderman.
One night in late August 1990, I was sitting in my living room continuing a normal evening of drinking after the mosquitoes drove me inside. I was making up stories in my head about adventures that would never happen, when my 15-year-old daughter appeared out of nowhere. She stood 10 feet in front of me, fiddling with a piece of paper in her hand. "Dad," she said with a tremor in her voice, "what did you think of the poem I read for you on the deck? You said you wanted to think about it for a while." "What poem?" I couldn't remember even seeing her earlier, let alone any poem. Thrusting the paper towards me, she said, "This poem, Dad. I've been working on it for days." I looked towards the floor and muttered something, hoping it was appropriate. I can't remember what I said. When our eyes met, I watched her expression change from hurt to anger, then from anger to disgust. I saw myself reflected in her eyes as we both realized at the same instant that I was a complete fraud. She crumpled the paper into a ball and tossed it onto the rug. Her hair swirled as she spun on her heel and ran from the room. I forgot the poem, but I still remember her sobs. I looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time and realized this was coming to an end, and damn soon. We were living off sales from 2 years ago, and the pipeline was empty. I was a liar, a cheat, and a phony, and one of the few around me who didn't realize it. If the world would stop, I thought, I could get myself together and begin to make things right. I tried hard not to drink anymore that evening, but the glass magically continued to fill itself. When the pendulum clock on the wall bonged 1 a.m., I stumbled up the stairs, undressed, and fell into bed. As the room began to spin, I felt absolute panic. I knew I couldn't face life without alcohol to kill the pain. Yet, I knew I would die if I continued to drink.
Powerless No Longer, Reprogramming Your Addictive Behavior by Peter W. Soderman is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
Here's an excerpt from Callie's audio journal, produced exclusively for patrons of the Gaytheist Manifesto.
A few weeks ago, I was in the throes of one of these fits of wallowing in my shame and regret, and something just started to feel different. Instead of wallowing, it felt more like mourning. And I started to think about it, and I realized that what I was experiencing that night wasn't wallowing, it was catharsis. I suddenly began to feel like I was letting go of that shame and regret. I was mourning for the time that I lost instead of just feeling sorry for myself. I was grieving that time so I could finally move on from it. And when it was over with, I felt ready.
For access to this and more, join the movement. Go to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto to learn more.
And welcome back to the Gaytheist Manifesto. We're having a party for Thanksgiving, and everyone is invited. The chat room is lively. I see lots of really cool conversation. I am having some technical difficulties getting Ryan on the line here, so I'm going to try calling him one more time. Come on. Skype music. I'm dancing.
Hello.
There he is, Mr. Ryan Bell. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Callie. Good. I'm doing well.
Awesome. You have been having a good Thanksgiving?
So far, so good.
Good deal. So, Ryan Bell is host of the Life After God podcast and the blogger behind Year Without God. So, Tell me a little bit about, I know this is, the podcast thing is a new project, and it's not just a podcast either, right? The podcast is just part of it?
That's right. Yeah, we're about 14 episodes in, and it's been great. And the focus of the podcast is talking to people about their sort of transition out of religious life into whatever they are now. And a lot of people are comfortable self-identifying as atheists, and others are more agnostic and confused. And so we're just trying to share stories with folks, and that really serves the larger purpose, which is to walk with people through this transition from belief to unbelief, or from theism to atheism, or from, whatever God meant to them in the past to some new understanding of the world. And it's about as murky as it sounds sometimes. If anybody's been through that, they know what that's like.
Well, right. And it's never a smooth transition. I don't feel, if there's very much an identity surrounding the religion that you're in. That's one of the things that I talk about in the talks that I give is, the atheist and LGBT thing. It's not just because religion generally takes a dim view of queer and trans people. It's, leaving your religion can cause almost the same kinds of identity struggles that, realizing that you're queer, realizing that you're trans does. So there's important intersectionality there. So that's one of the reasons I'm super glad the first 4 people I asked to be on, and wanted on for very specific reasons, all agreed for the show tonight. So I was really, really excited for that to happen. So, you came from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and
yes,
your family super religious as well?
Pretty, I've got a pretty great family. I'm just hiding in one of the bedrooms outside here, like where
Gotcha.
Everybody else is gathering right now. And they're very committed Christians, and they're religious in the sense that they participate in religious life, but they're also they've grown a lot, as I have over the years. And I think one of my family members just completed her marriage and family therapy education, and just completed her hours and certification and all of that. I mean, that's given her an incredible window into a part of humanity and the way our minds work and all of that she didn't have before. So though they are still religious, I would say very understanding and compassionate people.
That's awesome. So, you leaving your faith, was that a tough thing for them? Did that cause struggles, or?
I think it was hard for them. They kept it mostly to themselves, I think. But, the way that my grandmother is almost 91, she'll be 91 next month. And she still says to me, so sweetly, but also slightly, with a little barb in it, like, I know where you'll be right there with me in heaven, and God's got his eye on you. And she just has this really positive view that I am where I am today because of my own life experiences, and God understands, and God will have compassion on me. Which is certainly better than the alternative if she's
right.
thinking I'm going to hell or something. But I think it was hard for them, mostly because I had been a pastor for so long, and I was that was my identity, and they were proud of me. And when the church sort of pushed me out, that was really hard for them. And they tend to blame others. That way they don't have to be mad at me. But
right.
Yeah.
So do you talk to them about the activism and stuff that you do now?
A little bit, if they ask. I don't go out of my way to talk about it. It's all on the internet, obviously, and so there's no hiding. But they know I travel a lot and speak in various places, but we almost never talk about the content of my talks.
Right. Well, because I was on Dogma Debate a couple of weeks ago, and David was telling a story about how he was doing this FM radio thing, and he was super excited about it. And when he went to tell his mom about it, his mom's reaction was, I just wish they'd stop using your last name.
So that it wouldn't implicate her.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so funny.
And like, because you do all these things, and like wow, I feel like I'm, doing my part to make a difference, and this is stuff that I'm really proud of that I'm doing, and you go to share it with your family because, you don't do these things for your family, but it's nice to know that that your parents are proud of you and that they approve, because I think we all kind of crave at least some level of approval from, our parents and grandparents. And, I think, because I talked to my mom about, like, oh my gosh, I got my first atheist convention talk. I'm super, super excited. And she's like, oh, that's really cool. Have you had dinner yet? And I'm like, Mom, come on.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, they just want to talk about it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel like, it's when I was a pastor, I was kind of an outcast within my system too. I was never quite as conservative as I needed to be sort of on the inside of all of that. And so I felt like I couldn't even be proud of what I was doing then, because people just didn't understand what I was doing. And it's sort of similar now. They know that I do a lot of, good and interesting things, but it's not like I come up here to visit my family and say like, oh man, I just had these 4 days in Atlanta where I spoke to these free thought organizations and a couple of universities, about my transition out of religion. They're like, awesome, well done.
Yeah, but luckily enough, my day job is doing tech support in a call center. So like, if I feel like I have to make small talk, because when people ask you like, oh, so what do you do? Like, what they're really asking is what your day job is. But my day job is not the interesting thing that I do. Like, tech support is how I make money. It's not what I do. Activism is what I do. But of course, no one wants to hear about that. Well, I should say, no one who doesn't share those passions typically wants to hear about that. So like, I keep like 5 or 6 really fun, phone call stories on ready for those conversations.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you can either be successful and well thought of in your day and in your own contemporary age, or you could possibly be well thought of after you're gone or much later. And honestly, if I had to pick, I would rather be, whether I'm personally remembered or not, I would rather have my work matter in the long term, because I think some of us have this feeling that we're a little ahead of our time. Like maybe, it's the old saying, like if you're a leader and you get too far out in front of people, they'll think you're the enemy and start shooting at you,
Right. Yeah.
So it's a little difficult to relate to people in that way. So yeah, I think it's easy to feel a little bit bad about not being able to share all those successes and experiences with the people now. But I kind of think, years from now, it might be that people say, "Oh, that was ahead of its time. That was visionary work." And certainly, what the work you're doing, I think, is will be thought of that way. I mean, I think we'll look back and say, "How could we have ever been so narrow-minded about, people that are, in terms of their sexuality different than me? How could I have been so narrow-minded about it?"
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Because if you think about it, I mean, even if you look at the root words, I mean, this is like totally a base discussion to have, but like, if you look at the root word of progressive, it's progress, and the root word of conservative is conserve, right? So like,
right.
Like, and if you look at history, it has definitely been a history of progressive ideas winning, however painfully and slowly that happens sometimes. Like, that's usually what it is.
Yeah.
And, I'd never heard that, that saying that, like, if you get too far out in leading, that then people will, think you're the enemy and start shooting at you. But God, that is so apropos for current discussions.
Yeah. I mean, I can even think of times where, and I have the misfortune in a way of being, or the fortune, however you want to look at it, of being an ally about a lot of things. I'm not, I could hardly, I can never really claim to be an oppressed minority in any category, except maybe as an atheist. And I don't even think it's that, and personally, it doesn't affect me that much because I live in California, and it's not like I live in Alabama or something where it's really, really tough. And I think, as an ally, it's easy to get yourself kind of sideways, get ahead of yourself, get your, body out over your feet and sort of stumble. And it just takes a lot of humility too. I think you just have to be willing to learn all the time and to sort of be mentored by people that know firsthand what they're talking about. And, and so some of that getting shot at is probably helpful in some way, like people saying, hey, you're not quite right about that, or here's my experience that really differs from you. But the kind of shot at I'm thinking about more is people who think that you are really undermining the fabric of society because of what you're doing, and they'll look back, or maybe their progeny will look back and say, oh no, they were advancing society, they weren't hindering it.
Well, right. And when you say that, that brings to mind, what Trav and I were talking about earlier with, the whole social justice warrior thing, and people, looking derisively at people who go further left. And, there's the whole safe space versus free speech debate that's going on. That's like, it's like the worst false dichotomy in the history of false dichotomies.
I know, because I find myself wanting to cheer for both sides, and I'm like, hey, can I have it both ways, please?
Right. Well, I'm having a really, really great email conversation with someone that I met on Twitter about that whole thing, and we were just, we were talking about how, and it's like this in so many debates, right, where you just keep talking past each other, and you're not even really looking at what the other side is actually trying to say, because you're hearing what you want them to be saying. It's not even a deliberate straw man argument. It's just that you're, and when I say I mean mine too, because I have this reaction just like anyone does, is, there's the psychological reaction of whenever your beliefs are challenged, your reflex is to dig your heels in, right? Like that's kind of an evolutionary inheritance, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
And, so, he and I were talking about, and neither of us have actually staked out specific positions, because I think we both think that the argument is kind of a false dichotomy. But, we were talking so much about how it's like, people say, free speech. And we're like, we're not even trying to question or challenge that.
Well, I think especially the stuff that came up recently at University of Yale and Missouri.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of like almost an obfuscation, kind of the students, and again, there's also a situation of the inside view that the students have, especially the minority students, and then the public perception that gets reported in the media. I kept reading these blog posts from students who are like, it's not at all like what you're saying, what you're reading, this is what's really going on. And I was like, wow, it almost seems like people, so the students are saying, this is what it's like to be a person of color or a sexual minority or whatever at these universities. And then the response to that is free speech. It's like saying, why is the sky blue? And the answer is like, French fries. It's just like, what? Like, wait, what? Like, are we talking about the same thing? Like it's the person's experience of a school being fair and equal is a completely different issue than whether someone can exercise their rights to free speech, however offensive it might be. I mean, because really the antidote to bad ideas is better ideas, So right. I don't think to silence people's bad ideas is, first of all, it just never, on a pragmatic level, it just doesn't work. I mean, the more you try to silence a bad idea, people start thinking, well, why are they trying to silence that idea? Maybe there's something there. Like maybe why can't they just counter it with an actual argument rather than trying to mute that person? That's different than saying, like, as a person of color, I feel like I don't have fair access to a quality education that my similarly situated white colleague has, or something like that. That's different. I mean, that's completely different. So I was really confused by that whole debate and was wondering why free speech was the answer to these complaints. I guess it was because the presenting issues seemed that way.
Well, right. In fairness, the I feel like I'm almost giving in to this debate by even using the terminology, but for the sake of the conversation, the safe spacers, there have definitely been some overreactions, like, physically assaulting that kid. Like, right. I'm not going to condone someone being physically assaulted for, being a journalist, you know what I mean? But right. At the same time, like, I also have a lot of sympathy for the folks on the other side of that, because, they keep saying, like, well, silencing the media is the number one way to make sure your story doesn't get heard. And it's like, well, you're assuming that because the media has access, they're going to tell the story the way that it is.
Right.
Because that's right. As a member of the trans community, I know very much what it's like to have the news tell the story they want to tell that looks nothing like what the actual story is.
Right.
And I'm not going to advocate anyone's right to do that being taken away. But right. I'm also, if someone wants to make a space where, like, sorry, like, we're not letting journalists in here because we don't trust you to tell our story in any way that's accurate or unbiased, like, I have every bit of sympathy for that. Now, that doesn't mean you go beating the crap out of people to that end.
Well,
like,
you might want to have your event on private property then.
Exactly.
Rather than in a public space where, frankly, like it or not, the law allows the journalist to be there. So, I mean, some of these things get down into some technicalities, which kind of, again, can miss the point. But, it's a weird time we're living in. But I think it's good. I mean, in a way, we're discussing these things, right? Here we are, you and I even, just talking about this. That's what needs to happen. I just get frustrated and I've been, whenever I've had a chance to speak in the last few weeks, I've used some examples to just say, like, my concern is that we don't even have the space in our society anymore. Well, that's an extreme way to put it, but it feels like the space is shrinking where we can have an open and honest debate across ideological lines and really truly listen to each other's intentions. Rather than this kind of, someone gives an hour-long lecture and then for the next 4 weeks there are articles in fairly prominent, news outlets on the internet commenting on one sentence that the person said, right. Without really saying, like, okay, what was the intention behind this? Maybe they didn't say it in the perfectly polished way that they would if they had a chance to do it over again. Like, I just feel like we have to try to understand each other at a level beyond simply the words that we use, especially when words are changing so quickly. Like, I'm not a member of the queer community as you are, and I'm very liable to say something that you would say, look, Ryan, that's really not, when you say that, what we hear is this, and that's probably not, and then I'm like, oh, good, I'm so glad you told me. Like, because I don't know. I literally don't know unless someone teaches me or unless I find out somehow.
Yeah, no, that's totally valid. And I think, the other side of that is I think there's, there's a difference when, we talk about free speech in a moral sense versus free speech in a legal sense. Because, like, for example, like on a college campus, we can say that, legally, sure, anyone has the right to say anything that they want unless they're, directly inciting violence or threatening people. Like, I think we can all kind of agree on that line. But in the moral, category of free speech, where we talk about what ideas we're going to give platforms to.
Right.
One of the examples that I put forward, and I think my intentions were probably a little misunderstood on this Facebook post, and it's probably because I was angry when I wrote it. Like, I totally take take responsibility for that.
Sure.
But the extreme example I threw out is, like, so let's say I put a talk together that said, it was titled, "Maybe Hitler Had the Right Idea." Like, if I put that talk together and I said, like, I want to give this talk on a college campus, and a college campus said no, like, are all of the free speech activists now going to come to my defense because a college campus chose to not give me a platform? They're not. They're not silencing my legal freedom of speech. They're simply refusing me to give a platform for what I have to say.
Right.
And I think
they may have a strategic purpose for that, or a moral purpose to that.
And I think there is, because there seems to be much the same cry over someone being denied a platform as someone being thrown in jail for saying something. And it's like,
so how do we decide as a society, how do we decide, like, for instance, saying maybe Hitler was right is a thoroughly discredited idea, right? But to say there's no such thing as trans, like you're either male or female, and that's my position. First of all, that's not my position, but let's say like, hypothetically that's the person's position, and the school says, no, we're not going to give a platform to someone who wants to say trans isn't a thing, and here's why. Like, is that is it a matter of time going by that we discredit ideas that we no longer give a platform to, and I'm genuinely asking, like, I don't even know how to make these decisions. I mean, I pity the school administrators that are in this position of trying to decide. Plus, they've also got donors and trustees to account for, and it's complicated.
Well, right, and what I was kind of getting at by asking that question is like, and I genuinely don't know, because I'm not an academic. I've never been to college, so like. I felt like I was trying to genuinely ask the question, but I think the snarkiness and the way that I said it kind of obfuscated that. And again, like, I take responsibility for that. But kind of what I was getting at is like, well, so, where do we decide we draw the line? Like, are we going to honor and give a place to, the head of the KKK?
Right.
Like, in my mind, I'm thinking most people probably not. But probably are we going to give a platform to someone who questions the existence of trans people? Like, are we giving equal weight to those things? Because in my mind, they are the same thing. Right. Like, saying that that trans people aren't really trans is there's not the historical weight behind the statement that racist sentiment holds, but academically and intellectually speaking, those things are equivalent in my mind.
Right.
And so, like,
I think there's also a difference between discussing it in a classroom environment where you're looking at research and saying, these people say trans people don't exist, and these people say that it is, and here's the reasons why, and here's the reasons that this has been discredited, or this is the reason. You know what I mean? That's a different kind of thing than having a school assembly where the school is tacitly endorsing the view, or at least saying, maybe not endorsing the view, but at least saying, we think it's good for this person to air their views, even for just discussion purposes, right? Like,
right. And it's an honest question. It's an honest question where you draw that line.
Yeah, it is.
And someone in chat just asked, what does trans people have to do with racism? And I feel like that's a great question worth answering.
Well, yeah, it's identity. It's a difference of, to me, that the relationship is right. Like, it's a great question, and it's just about identities, and I think I've made the example. I've drawn the comparison even just between gay and lesbians, and the way in which, when I was a pastor, churches would discriminate against gays and lesbians being members or participants or leaders in the churches. And I would say this will be looked at one day the way we now look at segregated churches, or churches that wouldn't allow blacks to be in leadership in the church. And now we would look back on that and say, good Lord, what were we thinking? And I think it'll be the same. So I think it's a matter of otherness. Like, we have this obstacle that each of, like you said before, like sort of in our evolutionary conditioning, like we distrust the other, whoever that other is, and it's just hard to overcome that. And I think it takes serious training, especially if you're in the majority or you're a privileged person. It takes, like, I think, deliberate training to teach yourself to say, okay, I'm not going to take what seems normal to me as necessarily the right thing. That normal might just be my privilege.
Absolutely.
Is.
And what it comes down to is that, people of color and sexual and gender minorities are all groups that are marginalized and oppressed in one way or another. And, there's obviously more historical weight behind racism than I think there is between homophobia and transphobia, because in this country anyways, because of this country's history specifically. But, there is intersectionality in that, we as people tend to, group people who aren't like us. Like, we think people who are superficially like us, we tend to think like, well, yeah, we're a pretty diverse group, but we look at black people or trans people or gay people and think that they're rather homogenous.
Right.
When, really everyone is any grouping criteria that you could come up with would have a lot of diversity surrounding the other facets of their identities and their lives.
Yeah.
But, it just comes down to there's intersectionality, which is, that's like the entire concept of the show is intersectionality, specifically between atheism and, and LGBT activism. But, there's an episode for the folks listening live, and especially the person who asked the question. I do an episode about race with Alex Jules and Mandisa Thomas, where we talk a lot about intersectionality between homophobia, transphobia, racism, and just kind of bigotry in general. So that's it's a good reference for that. So, Ryan, you have been extremely generous with your time, my friend. I know you are at a family gathering, and I don't want to take up any longer than you've got here. So, real quick, if you want to plug your podcast, plug Life After God, tell us where we can find more on the internet and stuff here.
For sure, yeah. So, Life After God is simply at lifeaftergod.org, and pretty much everything is linked up there. The podcast is on Spreaker and iTunes and Stitcher and all the rest, but you can find links to that on the website. And we do one-on-one coaching with people who are going through transition from belief to unbelief or somewhere in between. And we also consult with atheist and free thought communities that want to be more understanding and empathetic with people that are on the beginning stages of that transition, to be more welcoming to people who are still questioning their beliefs and not quite all the way to the point of saying, I don't believe anymore. So yeah, you can find out all about what we're doing at lifeaftergod.org.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for taking time out. I know, you're doing a family gathering, and it really means a lot to me that you took the time out to be on the show here. So thanks a lot, and we will talk soon, my friend.
Oops, did I lose you right at the end?
Can you hear me?
Oh, crazy.
Oh, we lost Ryan right at the end. Oh, well, thanks a lot to Ryan for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate him as a person and for the work that he does. So, my friends, it has been a lot of fun doing this live show. I'm going to be honest and say that I had a little bit of technical difficulty about 20 minutes before the broadcast started, and I was freaking out. And as I said towards the beginning of the broadcast, I had a beer, and I feel like I'm loosened up a little bit. And I feel like this has been an awesome show with lots of contributions from lots of folks that I have a lot of respect for and a lot of love for. But as all things do, it must come to an end. I want to thank everyone in the chat room, everyone listening live, and of course everyone listening in archive. I know not everyone can, yes, equipment issues, Unknown Seaman, equipment issues. Bobby and Ashley aren't the only ones to have those. It has meant a whole lot to me to have folks hanging out for the show here. This is a project that means a lot to me, and it's cool that we. It's cool that we. Sorry, Hugh. We gotta cut it for the archive people, and for Spreaker's time limit. So there's that. Sorry, I'm reacting to the chat room in the microphone as if folks listening can see the chat room, because I'm a broadcast professional, folks. That's what I do. So it's meant a lot to me that everyone's hanging out. This has been an awesome experience, and I appreciate everyone's involvement. That, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto on Secular Media Network. I want to thank all my guests again for being amazing, for taking time out from their families, being with, to be with us here tonight. You can find the show on facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at GaytheistCali. You can find the show on Twitter at The Gaytheists. As you heard before, if you would like to support the show, you can make a per episode donation at patreon.com/thegaytheistmanifesto. And if you can't make a financial contribution, totally understand. I spend a lot of time broke too, but you can leave a 5-star review on iTunes, and that is a lot of help as well. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.